Chapter 36. The sword exploded. All the vampires suddenly surged towards Xian, and a large number of sword daggers in their hands chopped towards Xian. Xian's face changed and his figure retreated. Boom! Thousands of swords and daggers chopped through the air all of a sudden. Heiyan retreated explosively, not because Heiyan was afraid of them, but because these were his subordinates, and now they were all controlled. Open Heaven Palace. Hey, come on, Guhai said in a cold voice. Grabbing the string puppet pole, he instantly concealed himself into the grand formation, surrounded by fog, hidden in a place that Xian couldn't see. Of course, perhaps this big formation was nothing in front of the Open Heaven Palace powerhouses, still able to see Guhai. But, after all, with the fog covering it, Guhai looked erratic. HMPH, Guhai, run there. Xian let out a cold snort, and once again chopped with his sword. Hu, Lord, save me. Lord, my subordinates have no intention. A group of vampires tried their best to stop in front of Xian once again, blocking all of Xian's movements. Guhai's eyes were icy cold, and he did not have the slightest bit of mercy for these vampires who lived by sucking human blood. If he had mercy on vampires today, there would be thousands of innocent people who would become dinner on their table in the coming day. Boom, boom, boom. One by one, the vampires exploded in the aftermath of Heiyan stopping again and again. Xian's eyes were cold. HMPH, Guhai, string puppet poles. Do you really think that just by using them, you can threaten me, and I have no way to deal with you? Heiyan said in a cold voice. This time, instead of chasing after Guhai, he steeply probed his hand. Buzz! The power of the Heaven Opening Palace steeply surged towards the 2,000 vampires, and in an instant, all the vampires' bodies seemed to be fixed under a wave of icy blue energy. Young Lord, that string puppet pole. It's an imitation of the 10 Directions Club, right? Qing Feng unexpectedly looked towards the cross in Guhai's hand. Not bad. It's an imitation of the 10 Directions, all destruction, but unfortunately, the imitation is too rough, and it's useless when it encounters the heaven-opening palaces. Now, Heiyan is striking to force out the transparent thin threads in the body of a group of vampires. The white-clothed teenager said in a deep voice. Buzz! One by one, the vampires were manipulated by Heiyan, and they were suddenly slowly freed from the control of the string puppet poles. A hint of a sardonic smile appeared on Heiyan's face. The corners of Guhai's mouth also revealed a cold smile. Right now. Powerful and powerful, powerful and powerful. Tenxiong Yu's voices came out steeply from the great formation. However, they saw 10 square heavenly painted halberds suddenly appear and blasted towards Xian, who was trying his best to rescue the vampire. At the same time, from the ground, 10 false stone men also simultaneously combined their efforts to strike towards Xian. In the sky and underground, it seemed as if all directions of Xian were sealed off in an instant. Xian was in the middle of rescuing the vampires. Where would he have expected such a steep ambush? Li Shenji's face steeply sank. Young Lord, there's an ambush there. Guhai arranged an ambush long ago. Qing Feng was surprised. The white-clothed young man narrowed his eyes and said, an ambush of this level is not enough for a heaven-opening palace powerhouse. As expected, Heiyan relieved the vampire with one hand, and with a wave of his longsword in his other hand, a host of sword chests deeply appeared around him. Boom! With a loud bang, the Fangcha painted halberd, the palm strike of the foothill stone man, was blocked near simultaneously. Ha ha ha, with you guys. You're not even close. Heiyan laughed with a hideous face. Finished? Guhai's ambush fell through. Qing Feng frowned. No, you've overlooked the most important person, Guhai. The white-clothed boy's eyes stared. However, he saw Guhai steeply step forward. The long sword in his hand was raised once again. It won't work. Heiyan blocked the Fangcha painted halberd, and the faux stone man with his blade chair, but the sword dipper is still there. Gu Hai's Zhou Xia just now couldn't fight He Yan at all. Gu Hai did something useless, Qing Feng frowned. It's not useless, at this moment. He Yan has been cornered by Gu Hai. He can't move. He can only collide with Gu Hai hard. He's being restrained around his body. He can't take a step back. The white-clothed teenager said in a deep voice. It's impossible to step back. But how much power does Gu Hai have? How can he be a match for He Yan? He Yan doesn't need to retreat unless Gu Hai's blade power skyrockets again. Qing Feng frowned. Zhou Xia, 3. Gu Hai let out a loud shout. Buzz. A great vast storm of saber intent rushed straight out. The saber intent was ferocious, and all the vampires steeply stared with a look of despair in their eyes. It was a feeling of heavenly might. Outside the large formation, the two subordinates behind Li Shenji did not have the ability to see inside the grand formation, but also suddenly felt chills all over their bodies. Faces revealed a look of horror. This blade intent. What blade intent is this? A subordinate exclaimed. Impossible. It surged another 100 times. It's impossible to have this kind of blade technique. Li Shenji also shrieked in shock. Gu Hai had only entered the Yuanying realm for the first time, but the power of this blade was beyond the Yuanying realm. That blade hadn't chopped down, but a terrifying blade momentum was as if a heavenly blade was erected above one's head, and a morose coldness came over one's face. How? This blade momentum. Qing Feng also stared in surprise. Only the white-clothed boy, however, was steeply excited, and a strong battle intent gushed out from his eyes. Good sword technique, Zhou Xia-san. I'm going to fight this person in a sword fight. Battle intent surged in the eyes of the white-clothed boy. Zhou Xia-san. Before he could chop down, the aura was so steep that it pressured the entire valley violently. Outside the 28 great formations, in another great formation, Qin Zibai was dealing with Immortal Wana when a great sword intent steeply rushed straight in from outside the formation. Qin Zibai, who had originally struck out, all changed his face. Who? This saber intent isn't something that He Yan should have. As he turned his head to look, he just happened to see Gu Hai with a grimace on his face as he chopped down with a sword. And that strong to bursting saber intent emerged from the long saber in Gu Hai's hand. Gu Hai. Impossible. Qin Zibai abruptly exclaimed. Ancient Sea. Fairy Wana also looked at Gu Hai in shock. Before the blade cut down, the blade intent rushed to the sky. The purple light not only enveloped the entire valley, but it also shot up into the sky. Far away, countless cultivators were quickly running towards it. All of them were cultivators from Dragon Vein City. One by one, the Jedi cultivators had received the news that here, outside the city, a Dragon Vein had appeared. All the Jedi were here for the Dragon Vein, so they naturally scrambled to be the first to arrive. Before they even arrived at the valley, they saw the purple light of the valley rushing into the sky, and an overbearing and extreme blade intent erupted out. Who? What a domineering blade intent! What a strong blade intent! Who is this? The crowd of cultivators all stared with wide eyes. The flying boat where Sima Feng and Long Wenyu were standing. Long Wenyu had an anxious look on her face, not knowing what was happening in the grand formation. It wasn't until Gu Hai's circumstantial triple slash came out. The purple light broke through everything and exploded out, and the saber intent surged out, startling Sima Feng into a cold sweat. Brother-in-law's blade technique. It's brother-in-law, Long Wenyu said excitedly. What? This is Mr. Gu's, County Princess, don't joke. How is Mr. Gu? Sima Feng looked at Long Wenyu in shock. Step aside, don't block my sight. Long Wenyu pushed Sima Feng away excitedly looking at the distant large formation. Zhou Xia-san, how powerful it was. No one had experienced it as deeply as Xian. Before that blade had even chopped down, The blade intent was as if it had already split itself in half instantly. Under this overbearing blade intent, one's first reaction was actually to flee. Escape, throw everything away and escape. However, one could not escape. One could not let go. Once escape, 10 square sky painting halberd, 10-foot hill stone man palm, 2,000 subordinate swords, all greeted on oneself. He has no choice but to meet the battle. But under this sword, can I block it? No, I can't. The sword dipper in his hand was raised, resisting with all his might, but his heart had already sunk to the bottom, deciding that he was finished. Will I die here? Ice full of blood has been covered with blood. Eyes are about to be killed on the spot by this sword. Shi Yan's whole body is in the midst of trembling. Eyes have been glazed over, revealing a desperate roar. No. Ka 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 ka. As Gu Hai's blade chopped down, it was the long blade that was steeply covered with cracks. A glimmer of hope was steeply seen in Shi Yan's despairing eyes. Gu Hai's blade, it's going to burst. It's going to burst. Boom. Tilde 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 tilde. Sure enough, the long bronze blade exploded as it was about to chop into He Yan. The Big Dipper exploded into pieces, and only some strong wind tore some of the corners of Shi Yan's clothes around him. Buzz, the purple light suddenly disappeared. A death crisis, eliminated. He Yan's face changed wildly. Boom. Against all odds, He Yan blasted away from the Fangshan painting halberd and faux stone man, throwing away the crowd of vampires, and fled towards the back. Who you? He Yan retreated again and again in horror. In the outside world, Li Shenji, the white-clothed boy, Qing Feng, and the others all raised their eyebrows. The sword exploded. Qing Feng said blankly, "What a strong Zhou Jiasan." Even the sword couldn't hold up and exploded. How could Gu Hai have such a powerful blade? Li Shenji's face was terribly gloomy. Good Zhou Jiasan, good Zhou Jiasan. The battle intent in the white-clothed boy's eyes grew more and more intense. Boom. The sky was filled with pieces of the long bronze sword. Gu Hai's face sank. However, it wasn't that Gu Hai hadn't thought that the bronze blade wasn't sturdy, but that he had already considered it. To deal with He Yan in a hard encounter, Gu Hai was not strong enough right now. Even if he possessed the blade technique Zhou Jiasan, it was still not enough, because the consumption of energy in his body from this blade was extremely terrifying. The moment the bronze blade exploded, Gu Hai's internal energy was nearly empty. In other words, Zhou Jiasan, Gu Hai couldn't perform it yet. And just now, he was only doing it on purpose, using the bronze blade's explosion to make others think that he could chop out the Zhou Jiasan, only that the blade was not powerful. At the very least, it had succeeded in front of him. That Shi Yan looked at Gu Hai, it had long since ceased to be the contempt of the world from earlier, but a kind of horror, including Gu Hai taking out the absolute life knife at this moment, pulling the vampire with a puppet pole. The absolute life knife blasted through the bodies of all the vampires. He Yan didn't even come forward to pay attention anymore. Zhou Jiasan, too stunning, too frightening. Ah, Lord, help, don't eat me, don't eat me. Help. The vampires cried out in terror, but, at this time, Shi Yan didn't care if they died or lived, letting the absolute life blade devour them all. Ring by ring, Gu Hai had calculated this long before he came. Using Zhou Jiasan, he shocked the other party, and using the absolute life blade to devour the vampire's flesh and blood energy, feeding back 1,000th to himself. Everyone was shocked by Zhou Jiasan, and no one noticed that Gu Hai's face was already pale for his slash just now. And as the absolute life blade killed 2,000 vampires, Gu Hai's face was once again flushed. The Fangcha painted halberd disappeared, and the faux stone man sank into the ground once again. The 28 heaven and earth vertical formation was also withdrawn. All the vampires, all of them turned into a field of withered bones. Gu Hai was still the same Gu Hai. Only the bronze long knife had been replaced with the absolute life knife. Grasping the absolute life blade, he once again looked at Shi Yan. Apart from the absence of the vampires, it was almost the same scene as before, but at this moment everything was reversed. He Yan had previously scorned Gu Hai. Now, he was scorned by Gu Hai, and when he looked at Gu Hai, there was a sense of horror in his eyes.